between Europe and India. And we are welcoming today a number of experts. I would like to immediately give the floor to Mr. Sushil Kumar, DDG IoT at the Telecom Engineering Center, to give the welcome address for this inaugural session.
Thank you, Javier. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to esteemed participants who have joined this knowledge sharing webinar on cybersecurity for M2M IoT from various continents ranging from America, EU, and Asia. Myself, Sushil Kumar, Deputy Director General in TEC. On this occasion, we are privileged to have with us Sri Nizamul Haq, Member Services and ex-officio Secretary to Government of India, Department of Telecom, and Member Digital Communication Commission, for sparing his valuable time from his busy schedule. We welcome you, sir. We also feel honored to welcome Mr. Tony DeCoster from European Commission in this webinar. You are most welcome. We would also like to welcome all the eminent speakers of this conference who would enrich us with their knowledge, experience, and wisdom. Now we would like to welcome our Senior DDG and Head Telecommunication Engineering Center, Sri Ritu Ranjan Mittal. Welcome, sir. Sri R.R. Mittal is having around 35 years of experience in the Indian telecom sector, an alumnus of Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, and postgraduate diploma in public policy from TERI and belonging to the Indian Telecom Services batch 84. He has rich and diverse experience in the field of mobile communications, IT, new generation networks, telecom security, and setting of telecom standards. New generation network and IPv6 Ready Logo Lab have been established in his guidance. He has been recently selected as the chairman of ITUT Study Group 11 in WTSA meeting held in Geneva in March 2022. As Senior DDG and Head Telecommunication Engineering Center, his primary focus is on mandatory testing and certification of telecom equipment to ensure safe, secure, and quality products in the Indian telecom networks. Now, I would request Mittal sir to deliver the opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sushil. Good morning and good afternoon. Respected Sri Nizamul Haq, sir, Member Services, Digital Communication Commission, Mr. Tony DeCoster from DG Connect, and other esteemed participants and speakers. So welcome to this knowledge sharing session on cybersecurity for M2M and IoT. To start with, Telecom Engineering Center is a national standardization body under Department of Telecommunication. We are also the point of reference for WTO as technical barrier to trade for the telecom sector. TEC is also mandated to interact with ITUT, APT, IEEE, 1M2M, TSDSI, and other standardization bodies across the globe. As part of the organization, we have created many technical groups, which we call core groups, like radio, transmission, security. Recently, we have added 2 more, convergence and broadcasting, and even a 6G group as part of our continuous effort to keep in line with the current technological developments. One of the major responsibilities of TEC is the mandatory testing and certification. For mandatory testing and certification, we perform 2 main functions. We not only recognize the labs, designates them, the labs, we also issue test certification based on the results uploaded by these third-party labs. Coming to M2M, M2M is an important area which we are studying from 2015. Now, to ensure the security of smart infrastructure, it is required to ensure that only secure devices should be part of the network. So the security has to be at the design level itself. till date, we have released many documents based on the extensive consultation on the subject of IoT. To name few on the security, they are recommendations on M2M IoT security, which was released in January 2019, Code of Practice for Securing Consumer IoT, which was released in August 2021, Framework for National Trust Center, released in March 2022. Besides this, the work is also in progress on security by design principles for IoT device manufacturers and implementation of National Trust Center. Now, some of the security concerns which I'm sure the experts will be deliberating will be in a M2M environment. There is no attendance for the devices. They are all remote, and it is not a consumer anymore. So security attacks are more vulnerable in this sector, especially if it's a low battery capable device. Then we have seen that lot of IoT has taken implementation technologies which were traditionally in a network, for example, Bluetooth, Zigbee, IPv6. So there is a concern that all those inherent vulnerabilities which were there in those technologies, they might have cropped in M2M networks also, because actually all these technologies were never essentially designed by the security of design principle. One of other concerns that we would also love to listen is consumer awareness. In IoT, in any cyber security, while we have the technology solution, it is also to communicate consumer what could happen in case there is some problem. So maybe if the webinar could also deliberate on maybe a portal on which all the vulnerabilities are uploaded and then they can be accessed worldwide. Maybe this could be one thing. Of course, there is the standard portal which we all know is a common vulnerability enumeration, which is maintained by NIST, as well as it is also recommended by IoT. Now, TC has recently adopted 1M2M Release 2 specifications as national standards. Same has been referred by another standardization body in India, which is called BIS committee. And that has been referred further to the ministry, which is looking into the standards for smart cities, which we call as Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. In the end, I hope that this webinar on IoT security will provide an insight on the subject matter, which may be quite useful for all the participants. Thank you. Mr. Sushil, you are mute.
Sushilji, you are muted.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, sir, for giving the elaborative view of the activities being carried out in TEC and the importance of the IoT security on which we are having today's webinar. Now, moving to our guest from European Commission, Mr. Tony De Coster, who is an advisor in the European Commission for Policy, Strategy and Outreach at the Directorate General for Communication Network, Content and Technology, that is called as DG Connect. During his 30 years at the European Commission, he has worked with various issues from competition policy to supervised internet policies and 5G and the related activities on a single digital market as well as on ICT related issues. He is working in European Commission from 1989, and Mr. Tony De Coster is an economist by training. So we welcome you, Mr. De Coster, in this webinar. And now I would request you to share your views on cybersecurity policies and related legislations in the European Union. Over to you, Mr. Dipas.
Thank you very much, DDG Kumar. I mean, first of all, I would like to apologize, Director Kleiner from the European Commission, who unfortunately could not attend as foreseen today's event because of an unforeseen important political meeting which he had to attend, and he asked me to deliver his speech on his behalf. First of all, I would like to thank you, DDG Kumar, DDG Mitar, Dr. Haq, and also we heard that the secretary unfortunately was ill, so we would like to send our very best wishes for a quick return to the office and good health. I would also like to thank all the panelists and participants, distinguished participants in this webinar. We are very honored to be able to address this important workshop, which for us marks the intense cooperation which DG Connect, the European Union, the European Commission has had with India on digital policy, and in particular around standardization and the associated regulatory and policy approaches. We in the European Union attach the greatest importance to our cooperation with India on digital policy. Firstly, because we share our most essential values, fundamental values. In the EU, we have set those out as part of our digital decade strategy, through which we establish the direction and the targets we want to achieve to make a success of the digital transition by 2030. Cooperating with our strategic international partners is, of course, a key component of this strategy. And it is in this context that this year we celebrate 60 years of friendship between the European Union and India. India was one of the first Asian countries to extend diplomatic relations with the then European Economic Community in 1962. And our relations have progressively developed and evolved into a more strategic partnership in the 21st century. We share these common values and vision of unity, sustainability, humanity, growth, democracy, and economic prosperity. But this year, 2022, is a game-changing year for our relations in digital policy, as we will be taking these relations to a new level. As you know, Prime Minister Modi and the President of the European Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, on the 25th of April of this year, announced in Delhi to set up an India-EU Trade and Technology Council, a so-called TTC. This is a high-level strategic mechanism to tackle key challenges at the nexus between trade, technology, and security. It will steer and coordinate technical and operational work. So this is really only the second country, India is only the second country after the US with which the European Union will have such a cooperation for. We would like also to thank the Secretary because we know his personal commitment and attachment to the very intense dialogue which he has with the European Commission and with Directorate General Connect in the Commission on digital. And of course, the excellent relations we have with your Department of Telecommunications and with TEC, as well, of course, as with the colleagues at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, notably through these annual meetings which we have of the ICT Joint Working Group, and which is a framework within which our relations have really been constant and extremely developed. But we've gone further than the dialogue. We have established very concrete cooperation in many areas. And the workshop today is a very good example of that because it is supported by these programs which the European Union put into place, and that for cooperating on standardization in ICT. And let me just remind what are the main ones. First of all, we have a seconded European standardization expert in India. Is Dinesh, of course, the CESE project, which is currently running under a fourth phase, aiming at increasing the cooperation between Indian and European standardization bodies. We also have a bilateral EU-India program to support cooperation on ICT standardization. And through this program, we have fostered alignment of our standardization policies as well as alignment on digital standards. And last but not least, and that's the other program which supports today's workshop, we have the Regional Indico project to promote global setting of single standards for digital technologies, because those are essential. And India was one of the 6 countries which this Indico project was aimed at. Allow me to briefly mark the importance and intensity of this cooperation. Over the last 4 years with these projects, which I just mentioned, we have progressed a lot on developing common visions. We've organized together 12 actions aimed at sharing experience and best practice between the EU and India. We brought over, for example, and organized a visit of the colleagues of TEC in charge of testing and certification to European laboratories to see how the European system works and is in place. Because what is very important for us is, of course, this cooperation, and to avoid that there are additional costs which potentially could limit the development of the digital transition in India, in Europe. And we're very happy that we can share experiences on this. We are working together on 5G, even on beyond 5G, developing a common vision. We work together to make one M2M the national standard for IoT in India. And we're very happy and proud that this has happened. And finally, we work together, as I already mentioned, on avoiding the additional costs and burden that could come from testing and certifying telecommunication equipment, which by sharing our experience. These are just examples of the intense dialogue which we're having. And we've invested so much in our cooperation on standardization with India, because the promotion of common, single, interoperable international standards is top on the agenda for both India and for the EU. This is the shared vision of a single global standard, which will give the solutions for digital technologies to develop worldwide and allow this successful transition to a digital society and economy that we aspire to. It is through this intensive work together, through the Indico program and through our other cooperation projects, that the EU and India have achieved a lot. We learn from each other. Our cooperation enriches and underpins better the development of our respective policies. And finally, the main success is that we have achieved alignment in our policies and in our approaches to standardization for digital. Building on this success, we must pursue this objective of alignment and improving our cooperation in international fora. My colleagues Emilio Davila Gonzalez will intervene in the following sessions. I will intervene in the concluding remarks. And of course, there is also our representative at the EU delegation in Delhi, whom you all know and cooperate very closely with, our colleague Benoit Sauvroche, which will also actively participate in today's discussion. So again, thank you very much to our colleagues at DOT and TEC, and please send our regards and wishes for a prompt recovery from his illness to the secretary, and many thanks to all the participants today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. De Coster, for your words on collaboration on standards, technology, and the projects Indico and CESI, which are in progress in India under EU-India partnership. And these projects are quite helpful and give a lot of information in the field of standardization, like India is also the member of 1M2M, 3GPP and ETSI, and we are having discussions in the formal and informal meetings with the members of ETSI, especially Mr. Javier and his team, while working on some of the important topics like code of practice that we released in last year based on ETSI standards. So thank you very much for your words. And as our secretary, Mr. Raja Raman, He is not well, and he has regretted, but he has conveyed his wishes for the success of this webinar. Now, our member services, Mr. Nizamul Haq is with us, and I would request further to move to Mr. Nizamul Haq for the inaugural speech. So, Mr. Nizamul Haq, he is the member services and ex officio secretary to Government of India and Department of Telecom. He is the ITS officer of 83 batch, and he is alumni of IIT Roorkee. Earlier it was known as University of Roorkee. So he is having around 36 years of experience in leadership positions in different verticals of the digital communication network and services like installation, development, operation and maintenance, security, etc. He has played important roles in Digital India program and National Broadband Mission. So now I would request Sri Nizamul Haq sir to deliver inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sushil ji. Mr. Tony DeCoster from DG Connect, Mr. Mittar, Senior DDG TEC, eminent speakers from India and abroad, and all the participants in this webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. It's my pleasure to share my views on the need of cybersecurity for the IoT domain. IoT-based solutions are being used across the globe to create smart infrastructure in various sectors, namely energy, transportation, banking, critical services, water management, smart homes, smart cities, etc. As per the projections by Ericsson, there may be around 24.6 billion connected devices across the globe by 2025. Out of this, around 21% will be on cellular technologies. On the policy side, Department of Telecommunications, DOT, released National Telecom M2M roadmap in 2015 and National Digital Communication Policy NDCP in 2018. Some of the important points available in DCP are like secure and sustainable ecosystem is to be developed for massive scale of 5 billion connected devices by 2022. Creating a roadmap for technologies and its use in the communication sector such as 5G, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and M2M. Establish a multi-stakeholder-led collaborative mechanism for coordinating transition to Industry 4.0. DOT has already given the permissions and the trial spectrum to telecom services providers, TSPs, for conducting trials for development 5G use cases as per the priorities and technologies partners identified by TSPs. Trials in progress. Recently, DOT service providers registration guidelines, which will help in the proliferation of IoT ecosystems. With the increase in IoT-based solution, network and internet connections, these systems may be subjected to vulnerability and digital attack. Cyber attack in any critical infrastructure may be catastrophic. In view of the various hacking attacks on IoT network, IoT security is the prime need to safeguard connected devices and network in IoT domain. To connect to the internet opens them to a number of serious vulnerabilities if they are not properly configured. In addition to conventional security solutions, need is to provide built-in security in devices for dynamic prevention, detection, diagnosis, isolation, and the countermeasures against successful breaches. I am happy to mention that TC has released a large number of specifications in the telecom sector and also technical reports in IoT domain based on global standards and best practices. TC specifications are being referred by various ministries, departments, and standardization bodies. TC has also been entrusted with the responsibility of mandatory testing and certification of telecom equipments, which may ensure the safe and secured ecosystem in the long run. Important actionable points emerge from the TC technical reports being used in policy standards are 13-digit numbering schemes for SIM-based devices, gateways, embedded SIM, IPv6 for devices, gateways to be connected to PSTN, PLMN spectrum for low-price wireless communication technologies, their importance for sharing of data, etc. Standardization is a collaborative effort, and it is worth to mention that TC, TSDSI, and BIS are working in collaboration. Even at the global level, ITU, ISO, and IEC created this joint task force on smart cities. DOT is a member of ITU and BIS of ISO and IEC. TC participates and submits contributions in various ITU study groups. TC adopts as well as refers the global standards released by ETSI, 3GPP, 1 M2M, IEEE, etc. TC has adopted 1 M2M release 2 specification as national standards, which will help in interoperability, data sharing, and security related features at the platform. Recently, TC released Code of Practice and Framework of National Trust Center, which will help in provisioning of secure IoT devices and also in managing vulnerabilities. TC should carry forward the work based on global standards, a significant role in the development of standards, and also engage the academia, startups, and the industry. It is expected that TC DOT policy and standards will facilitate the development of IoT ecosystem in increasing secure smart infrastructure in the country. I am happy to note that this webinar has been organized jointly by India and the European Union. It will further strengthen the collaboration between India and EU on standards, policies, and emerging technologies like IoT, 5G, cybersecurity, etc. I hope this webinar on IoT security will give an insight of the subject and will be beneficial to all the participants.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your inspiring words and guidance. We assure you, sir, under your able guidance, TC will be able to carry forward the work as per your expectations. And we have got help from the ETSI and other standardization bodies from the European Union time to time in completing our technical reports. So thank you very much, sir. Now I would request Ms. Hasima to deliver a vote of thanks to our guest speakers of the inaugural session. Over to you, Hasima.
Thank you, sir. Good morning and good afternoon to all the dignitaries, distinguished speakers, and guests. It's a very proud feeling for TEC today to express gratitude to Honorable Member Services, Department of Telecommunication, Government of India, Shri Nizamul Haq, for taking out time from his busy schedule. We are thankful to him for his inspiring inaugural address on cyber security for M2M IoT and filling us with enthusiasm to conduct this webinar. On behalf of Telecom Engineering Center, Department of Telecommunication, Government of India, I am extremely thankful to Mr. Tony D. Costa from DG Connect European Union for his gracious presence and keynote address. I am sure this will strengthen India-EU collaboration. We in the IoT division would like to express our sincere thanks to Senior DDG and Head TEC, Shri R.R. Mittal, who has encouraged us to organize this webinar, and we get benefited by his able guidance and experience. Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks in the webinar. Most importantly, I would like to express thanks to Mr. Xavier from Indico HC and Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma, CESI, for their concerted efforts in organizing this webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the senior officers, our industry co-partners, my colleagues, and all those who have joined this webinar. Thank you all. With this, we come to the end of the inaugural session. Now we'll move to the technical section, and I now request Mr. Xavier to commence the technical session. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Xavier.
Thank you, Mrs. Ashima. We will now, I'm displaying the agenda as a reminder for everybody. We'll now start a session that focuses on the policy, legislation, and standards for IoT security, which will really set the stage in order to then go further in the agenda with the testing and certification considerations. I invite Mr. Sushil Kumar to moderate this session, and I hand over to you, Sushil, for the session. Thank you very much.
Sir, you are muted. Sushilji, you are muted.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Javier. This session on IoT security policy perspective, legislation, and standards. I shall start with some of the slides of my presentation, and then we will have the eminent speakers in this session.
Emilio, Sushilji will share few presentations, then he will invite you, please.
Okay, sorry.
Actually, somebody else is sharing the presentation.
Yeah, he will stop. Mr. Emilio will stop it. Please go ahead, sir.
I think my screen is available with you.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And this session on IoT security policy perspective, legislation, and standards. So these few slides are prepared related with the TEC, and as already mentioned by Senior TEC, that TEC is a national standardization body for telecom and related ICT sector, and it is also the national inquiry point for WTO TBT, and it has been mandated to coordinate with ITUT. We participate in ITUT meetings, 3GPP meetings, 1M2M meetings, and ETSI meetings, and also with the other standardization bodies. So MTCT, mandatory testing and certification of telecom equipment, that is the flagship project of TEC, and it is the designated authority to accredit the CAPs. We are having more than 50 labs for the testing and certification of the telecom and IoT products. We are working in IoT domain from 2014 onwards in multi-stakeholders working group, and we released around 18 technical reports in various verticals like power sector, intelligent transport system, remote health management, safety and surveillance, gateway and architecture. And then based on the outcome of these reports, further study was done. Then the M2M number resource requirement like 13-digit numbering scheme came from this. V2V, V2I radio communication and embedded SIM. Its study was done, and we are having the next speaker, Mr. Sarad Roda. He will be speaking about embedded SIM, and spectrum requirement for power line communication and low power RF communications. Then on smart cities, smart homes, communication technologies, M2M IoT security, smart village and agriculture, and code of practice for securing consumer IoT, and framework for National Trust Center for testing of M2M devices and applications. So the documents mentioned at point number 13, 15, and 18, they are related with the security. So M2M IoT security, this document we released in 2019, and code of practice based on ETSI standards 103645 or ETC-EN 303645. It was released in 2021, and the framework for National Trust Center, it has been released in March 2022. So as we know that this is a very, very important subject. IoT security is very important, as elaborated by our guest speakers in the inaugural sessions. We also adopted the 1M2 release 2 specifications as national standards, and the same has been referred by Bureau of Indian Standards in its IoT reference architecture. And this IoT array has been mentioned by Smart City Mission in its RFP and issued advisory to Smart City SPVs. So TC is also having IoT Experience Center, and some of the important documents which are having the significant contributions from India, that in the IoT domain, that is Y Supplement 53 on IoT use cases and Y Supplement 56 on Smart City use cases. On IoT security work items, like device manufacturer, they should be mandated to implement the security by design principles in M2M devices manufacturing. It is very, very important. And a second one is the National Trust Center, on which we have released the document. If we see the security by design work item, this mentioned at point number 1, it is related. It will provide the secured IoT devices, and work item at point number 2 is expected to create a trust about the IoT devices and trusted IoT ecosystem by means of testing and certifications. So in the code of practice, while going through the various documents released by IoT SF and also the by UK DCMS, we came to the conclusion that the first 3 principles, no universal default password or ban default password, then implement a means to manage report of vulnerabilities and keep software updated. These are required to be adopted by the industries. So we have also requested DOT to make them voluntary first and then making them mandatory. At least the devices which are produced by the IoT device manufacturers, they should remain secured. But the devices which have been deployed, whether it has been tested or not, or security has been created, they may become vulnerable. So how to address those vulnerabilities? Then we need some central entity to address these vulnerabilities, to get these vulnerabilities addressed by the manufacturers. As all the IoT devices are connected to some platforms, and the platforms should be capable enough to detect the vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities should be further communicated to National Trust Center. There's some central entity on the open APIs. That is basically the concept of this. So this mentioned, then I would request all the eminent speakers and the participants, if the people are having some idea about the trust center which is being implemented or is expected to be implemented somewhere across the globe, may kindly be shared with us its architecture. Then what is the criteria of testing and certification of various type of IoT devices, and whether the platforms are also being tested. If yes, what is the mechanism? From this today's webinar, what we expect the deliverables from this webinar, like the information about the IoT security and vulnerabilities management guidelines, best practices, and the standards. Then the testing and certification of IoT devices and other entities like platform and applications. Then classification of IoT devices depending upon the risk associated with the applications, and testing of IoT devices against security guidelines, namely TS 103645. So now we would move to our eminent panelist in this session, and moving to first one, Mr. Emilio Davilo Gonzalez. I'm sorry if I've spoken wrong. So Davilo has been working since 2013 in the unit dealing with the innovations at DG Connect in European Commission. He is responsible for coordinating ICT standardization strategies, liaising with the standards, developing organization active in ICT, and in particular building bridges between research and standardization, and how standardization contributes to innovation. In this capacity, he is also responsible of following up international ICT standardization, including cooperation with EU trading partners on ICT standardization. Within this framework, he has been following the different cooperation activities with India and TSDSI. Now, I would request Mr. Develo to kindly share his views.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I can share my
Yeah,
screen
sure,
now.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, can you see it?
Yes, we are able to see it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to me to be here in this workshop of cooperation with India. Hope next time we can do it face to face because it's more interesting. Cybersecurity, as is the case for India, is quite high in the political agenda of the European Union. And this can be seen with all the activities that have been done, and in particular, of course, we share all the concerns about the security of the networks. We issued the Network and Information Security Directive, or recently the Cybersecurity Act, the 5G Toolbox. But in my presentation, I will focus on the policy, regulation, and application of standards for the 5G security for consumer IoT, including some of the issues you are mentioned, like how to do the certification, compliance, and test. So the first of thing is, as you have mentioned, the Internet of Things equipment, they are based on, they are communicating equipment. And then we have the regulation on radio equipment directive that apply to this equipment. They are connected to emitting and receiving signals. And in that sense, this is the act, the mention, the reference to the act, and all the articles applied, including EMC, electromagnetic compatibility, interoperability with the networks, but also now we are working on some specific articles on addressing cybersecurity and privacy challenges. How does it work? In the Radio Equipment Directive, there are essential requirements that are defined that any equipment that is subject of the scope of the directive needs to comply with, for instance, to ensure the protection of health or safety of persons or electromagnetic compatibility, and also efficient use of radio spectrum and avoid harmful in infrastructure, harmful effects in the infrastructure. But there are also, they should comply with other requirements, like this in the working with the accessories, with other radio equipment and interfaces. And now the three important issues that are now under consideration with the approval of new delegated act are that and are related to security and cybersecurity, is that the radio equipment does not harm the network, causing unacceptable degradation of service, that including safeguards. Here I have to say that we very much also support privacy and security by design principles. So personal data and privacy are protected, and also ensuring protection from fraud, that in particular in the case of IoT and in particular consumer IoT devices, we have seen a lot of misuses in that sense. But then once we set up these essential requirements, how does it work? We work on the base of so-called harmonized standards, which support this EU legislation. So the European Commission does not develop the standards or technical specifications, but we list that we have seen in the case of the RED major functional requirements, which can are for the different specificities of the devices, what they have to comply if they want to be included in the European market. And then we ask the European standardization organizations to develop standards based on so-called standardization requests that could provide presumption of conformity with these essential requirements. These standards can, if possible, based on international standards. So they provide this harmonized standard, a single reference for EU member states. And in a case like the European Union, where we have 27 member states, this is important because it facilitates the introductions of equipment in the market. And in the case of those articles that I mentioned, so that affect cybersecurity, privacy, and data protections, now we have this standardization request under preparation, and it's hoped that it will be approved soon. How then this conformity assessment work and how is this testing? So we have two main avenues at disposal of the manufacturers of radio equipment, including Internet of Things equipment, or those importers that bring equipment from other countries into the European market. One is the self-assessment, which is very easy. As we have these harmonized standards that provides presumption of conformity with essential requirements, that they have to issue a declaration of conformity with those harmonized standards. This is again a voluntary issue. If they want to have other ways to prove it, then it's fine as far as they prove the compliance with essential requirement. But of course, then the burden of the proof relies with the equipment manufacturer that use this avenue. Normally, most of the manufacturers or those that are bringing the products to the market, they use the harmonized standards avenue. And then you have the CE marking, and then the product is able to be introduced in any of the 27 member states, and also those that are aligned with these schemes, for instance, from the European Economic Area. The other way is to go to independent labs, which where we have notified bodies that suffer a mechanism of accreditation and through clear standards. And these bodies, these laboratories are notified to the European Union. In the whole mechanism, they have a mechanism of cooperation between them and a committee that follows up the activities. So a manufacturer can use it, an independent lab, to say, okay, here is my equipment, please verify that it complies, and then they will need to incur cost. But normally it's based in the presumption of conformity with the harmonized standards. The market surveillance authorities of the member states, if they think that there may be an issue with the declaration of conformity with harmonized standards, of course, they are free to ask, in particular, using these independent labs to issue a procedure of verifying of the conformity. And if it's not in conformance with essential requirements, then even the product can be retired from the market. But this is basically the major avenues, and most of them they use the self-assessment in the laboratories and the voluntary declaration of conformity with harmonized standards. Now, and this applies to the Radio Equipment Directive, but of course, with the issue of the cybersecurity, now recently the European Commission adopted the Cybersecurity Act, which included a new type of cybersecurity certification schemes that so far is voluntary schemes to provide more guarantee on trusted services and trusted devices within setting up a new cybersecurity certification framework. This addresses the possible market fragmentations with different requirements from the different member states, and it applies to kind of product, services and processes. As I say, so far it's a voluntary certification framework, although this may later, if decided in collaboration with member states, become mandatory one if the conditions applies. Is based on a risk-based approach, and again, then there will be a EU certification declaration of conformity, in the same way that we had, for instance, for this mandatory CE marking for radio equipment, radio telecommunication equipment. It defines different assurance levels based on this risk-based approach. So for basic, substantial, or high, so you can provide this information and make sure and create more trust with the consumers. And of course, the member states of the European Union, they have a role, for instance, proposing the drafting of candidate schemes or having the different participation in different groups that look at the different schemes.
And it will be. Please be fast.
Yeah, I have only one more slides.
Thank you.
Where standardization applies here, we have a relations. For instance, if you develop these cybersecurity schemes, let's say for IoT consumers, you may expect that we have a collaboration, and in particular, this is done by ENISA, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, looking at what standards are available in the market that could provide for this compliance with the security requirements. And this could be, for instance, the one that ETSI has issued recently. But and then there is, of course, a follow-up conversations with all the standardization organizations, with the stakeholders, in order to select the right standards that could fit the scheme. But I will stop here, because then next there is my colleague with ENISA that will develop more all these things. Thank you very much. Namaste. Here you can have more information and references.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Davila, for giving a detailed brief about the RED policies and the brief about the work going on in CSA and ENISA. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Moving to our next speaker, Mr. Andres Mitarkas from ENISA. Dr. Mitarkas is the head of Unit Market Certification and Standardization in the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA. He co-chairs the Stakeholder Cybersecurity Certification Group, that is SCCG. Prior to joining ENISA, Andreas served as General Counsel in Globalization as a Senior Counsel in Verizon.
Good. Many thanks.
Over to you, Mr. Mitrakas, for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. It's a great pleasure to join you. Actually, I have a few slides. I'm just trying to share my screen. Hope I can make it.
Yeah, it's coming.
Is it?
It's there.
All right.
Please put it in a slide mode. That's it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do so. It seems that it's not responding. So let me stop sharing and restart over again. So let me see what I can do here. Apparently, I cannot share my entire screen if I put it like so. So that would be too clumsy to.
No issue. You can present in the same way.
Come again? Is that okay if I leave it as it is? Because I did not get many options. I'm not probably a registered user of.
You can try one more time, and just in case if it doesn't work, Andreas, you can just flip it as without the slides.
Yeah. Yes, let me reopen the application because I lost it. And okay, last try, and let's see what comes out now. Window, here's the presentation. Right. I think you can still see the same like before. And oh yeah, I probably have it full screen now. Is that right?
Yes, please do that.
Excellent. Right. So many thanks. My name is Andreas, and I'm very pleased to join you on behalf of ENISA. I just wanted to kick off by saying that I'm here to learn and also to share. We do not live just for ourselves, but we're here to help each other. Just to paraphrase something from Melinda Pagna. Appropriately, I have three little points for you. A notion of measurable trust as it develops in the EU, an approach towards implementing the cybersecurity certification framework, and three quick examples of our tangible outcomes that culminate in the work of ENISA. In ENISA, as you can see, we build the capacity. We help building the capacity of the member states. We support the member states in operational cooperation, and the Commission and the member states along the lines of cybersecurity policy. But topical to this workshop is the area of trusted solutions. And in the EU and in relation to cybersecurity, trusted solutions has also come to mean cybersecurity certification. So we provide the means so that others can conformity assess products and services and processes and classify them according to the desired assurance level. So how does that all happen? I will not repeat what my good colleague Emilio Davila suggested on the legal framework, but on our end, ENISA is a regulatory agency within the EU. Therefore, it always needs a go signal coming from the Commission or from the member states in order to actuate itself with cybersecurity.
Mr. Andreas, yes. May I interrupt? Your slides are not flipping. So if you could just go down the pages, if they're not displaying in a slide mode, yeah, please do that. Now it's okay.
Is it better now? Is that okay?
Yes, please flip it. Every time you change the slide, please flip it.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
So can you see my full screen now, my full slide?
No, full screen is not coming somehow. So it is still in a non-slide, non-presentation mode, but it's okay. You can flip the pages.
This is it better now?
We see page 5 right now.
You should see page 5, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. So just to go back to my train thoughts, I was referring to the go-ahead signal that ENISA gets from the Commission and or from the member states. Then the work involves experts that support ENISA to put technical requirements together. And when the scheme is all done and ready, it receives the opinion of the member states, and then it's proposed to the member states to vote for it and becomes part of EU law. So it's a very delicate matter to carry out, to promulgate certification schemes at our level, because eventually it becomes the law. Now, here I'm referring to notions that, again, Emilio suggested before. Once a scheme has been adopted, it enters the member state domain for its implementation. And there we have an environment that features accreditation at a high level concerning the ITSEPs, the conformity assessment bodies that then become testing facilities for the high level, for assurance level high, and as well as other conformity assessment bodies that operate within a member state for lower levels of assurance. Eventually, we have certificates that are issued, and all of them will be published by ENISA. So if in the future industry requires those certificates, they would use an ENISA resource for the entire European Union. By the way, we're also looking into a small set of services around these certificates to be published. Now, I mentioned already a few things around the basic notion of the workflow. I mentioned that we need a work program, that we have experts organized in ad hoc working groups. I mentioned voting. I didn't mention monitoring and maintenance, which happens in 5-year intervals once a scheme has been adopted. That's important because this 5-year period leaves us enough space to test and validate our assumptions, also adapt and make schemes future-proof, robust, because we expect that several of these services will remain for a good deal of time with us into the future. But in order to create more cohesion at our level within ENISA, we've developed a methodology building on threats and risk assessments to determine assurance levels for industry-related schemes. We involve stakeholders, not just experts, but also the member states. And then we've developed the notions of user guidance and of pilots in order to test our ideas and to provide inputs to the users at the phase, to facilitate the phase of implementation. Then we'll also look into the metrics, what exactly we would need to measure over time once we have schemes adopted. Now, just to give you a slightly different view, I mentioned that we have already a range of schemes that we've been working on. We do not see each scheme developing as a standalone island, but rather as developing across connectors. We see vertical and horizontal functions or cross-cutting elements that can be used across different schemes. Just to give you an example, we see that the provisions for conformity assessment bodies, the provisions for accreditation, they should be all but identical or extremely similar to one another across schemes. So this way we can have performance and function as well as a reasonable amount of interoperability across schemes. Users would like it, vendors would like it, and the public authorities, of course, would have an easier time adapting. In terms of links to standardization, ENISA has become known for gaps analysis and standards interpretations that developed over time across different policy areas. I have trust services, electronic signatures, for instance, where ENISA did a bit of work in the past. But currently, we've stepped up slightly our game because we've come across areas that have a standardization interest from our standpoint. And to quote just two, one is the cloud services, the other one is the methodologies, those risk-based methodologies for the determination of assurance levels that currently we have proposed to European standards organizations and Senelec for further consideration. So we hope that in the future, we will not just compile odd technical requirements, security requirements, but we'll be able to quote a European standard. And who knows, maybe hopefully we'll manage to influence international standardization and bring those standard provisions further forward. Of course, standards organizations would do that, but ENISA would be there to act as a thought leader and contributor to their work. Currently, our most mature proposed candidate scheme concerns common criteria. India has been involved with common criteria for a very, very long time as a consuming nation, and since 2013, if I'm not mistaken, as a certificate issuing nation. So we built on the substantial experience of the member states in the EU to propose a candidate scheme that further extends these provisions and adapts them to the new legal framework that this gives this competence to the Commission and to the EU level. It brings everything under the treaty. And the draft implementing act is underway. I think that people are dotting the I's and crossing a few T's before it can be formally tabled on the agenda of for voting. In terms of cloud services, again, work has advanced quite a lot. The scheme is all but done. It's currently considered or will be put soon forward to the consideration of the member states. Again, we look at three levels. It would be basic, substantial, and high, as opposed to the common criteria scheme that only focuses on substantial and high levels. However, the high level in EU, following on the notion of digital sovereignty, is currently receiving a lot of attention because it's the first opportunity on a policy item that involves ENISA, where we do not need to simply look into matters from a technical standpoint, but we also have to interpret policy as well as slightly politically skewed concepts and make them fit in our technical conformity assessment provisions. So indeed, it's a difficult equation to solve, and we're looking forward to developing the concepts a little bit further in the future. That might or might not lead into small delays. Then our largest bit is related to 5G. As you know, the European Union has been proactively looking into how to become more, to set provisions that are measurable. Again, we have started building a scheme across the provisions of the GSMA on network equipment and on the electronic identification through eSIM, through the EU ICC provisions. We're looking into analyzing and getting the most out of the good work of the GSMA, package it according to our own risk assessment, and propose it as a scheme. This is work in progress. We do not expect to get concrete results before very early next year. And hopefully we'll be able to have something mature to share sometime next year, probably by next year, Q4. Important work. It will take some time before we see it coming because it's so complex and so far-reaching as a scheme.
Mr. Andrea, may you please be fast?
Yes, quick policy follow-up. Two more slides, 2 more minutes. You can see a few ideas, the likely schemes as they related to the...
Your slides are not moving. Slides are not moving at all.
Oh dear. Let me just give you a notion of AI that perhaps is a far-reaching concept of interest for certification. IoT, industrial IoT, consumer is equally important, and critical infrastructure might play also into the future. And my last message to you is that on the 2nd, the 3rd of June, we have our cybersecurity certification conference. If you simply Google ENISA certification conference 2022, you get all the links. If you would like to join us, you're very welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Andreas, for giving the detailed work being carried out in ENISA documents. They are quite knowledgeable, and we have been benefited by those documents. We have gone through a number of documents released by ENISA. Thank you very much for your presentation. So moving to our next speaker, Mr. Sarad Arora, ex-MD and founder, Sensorize Digital Services. Mr. Sarad is an entrepreneur with expertise in communication and security technologies. His initiative have involved bringing end-to-end technology agnostic secure solutions with devices, portals, and lifecycle management in the M2M IoT space that leverages the embedded SIM, new air sensors, devices, and cloud platform. He has worked extensively with policy, regulation, and standards, providing input to the authorities such as the TRI, Controller of Certification Authority, Telecom Engineering Center, I2, DOT, mobile operators, and the telematics device ecosystem. Prior to founding Sensorize, he was the Chief Officer for Wireless Solutions at Tata Teleservices. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering honors and a master's in economics honors from BITS Plus. In fact, the first study of the embedded SIM was done in 2015 in TEC, and Mr. Sarad has contributed in that study. And if we say the creating embedded SIM ecosystem in India, that credit goes to Mr. Sarad. Over to you, Mr. Sarad, for your presentation.
Thank you, Sushilji. I'm just going to check, is my presentation and my voice both clear?
Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words. It's a great privilege. I'm going to try to help you, and Dineshji. Dineshji, thank you very much for this session. I will try to, as instructed the day before, finish in 8 slides. And hence, slides will be brief. Questions are more than welcome. Please stop me at the point where the question is to be asked, if possible. That way it works best. My subject today in consumer IoT security is to basically bring up the discussion of the trusted third party as one concept and classification of devices and use cases as the other, to try to make a case for how India is progressing down the road of cybersecurity for IoT. And as I said, the work done by the standardization agencies is absolutely phenomenal. I have absolute delight in saying that whether it's TEC or TSDSI, DOT, and BIS, or CESE for that matter, coordination amongst the tech, let's just say, agencies has been absolutely brilliant the last 7-8 years. Okay, with that said, I now try to transition my slide. It doesn't seem to happen. So I do a page down, it seems to work now. And I do a page up, it works now. Okay. So proliferation of IoT use cases in India is not very different from what is perceived or what is reported the world over. We are a bit behind, if I would say one thing, in the industrial IoT compared to what I understand may be happening in Europe and for that matter in the US. But in some other areas, like for instance, vehicle tracking, I guess we have a more mature ecosystem than any other country because of the nature of initiatives that have been taken in the automotive industry, including the AIS 140 standard in itself. But any case, on the left and right, you see what I believe are some of the key use cases of IoT, and these are not necessarily consumer IoT, but the point is to say that the security primitives have not changed. This is what I saw when we were setting up the root certification authority in 2002 in India, and this is how it is now. Pillars of security are still the same. The CIA triad, and now with consumer IoT topped up with non-repudiation. I think that really sums up the, of course, there is always the discussion about what happens to accessibility and availability, but to my mind, those things come up, and then there are 11 such security parameters, but these continue to remain my first pick on what are the security primitives that we need to focus on. And from there, of course, comes the whole concept of what is a smart society that can take care of its security. Identity, safety, security as one pillar, and the work that Sushilji's teams have done in root of trust, security by design, framework for National Trust Center. It's totally amazing work in light of how spot on it is in terms of priority and what is getting done. So, and then of course the TEC, MTCTE in the same area becomes very important. Availability, QoS, and manageability, those are the other verticals in terms of a sustainable IoT security infrastructure. And then at the end is the smart cities platform or data sharing platforms, because all of these connected devices generate data. And just in the morning today, there was another panel discussing data privacy and security. So data sharing, interoperability, data privacy, security, they end up forming the third pillar from my standpoint in terms of how a smart society should look at security. Now, good news is that BIS has already, as has already been mentioned in some other presentation, taken the step to look at the IoT and ICT RA reference architectures, and the clear focus on managing data again seems to be spot on, and that subsequently merges well into the TEC M2M security report that Mr. Mittal spoke about earlier. This is, in my opinion, a very readable and a very comprehensive document in terms of saying, how do you classify? And actually, without classification, there cannot be security in a market where there are going to be 20, 50 billion devices. You have to know what you're looking for. And in order to do that, you need classification. In order to do classification, you need identity. For identity, you need a root of trust. And beyond root of trust, you need some crypto mechanism that can work across the small power factor, the small footprint processors, etc. And that brings in the question of registration and certification, which both the Honorable TRAI and DOT in their good wisdom have implemented through MTCTE. And now, just about 2 months back, the opening up of the M2M registration service provider, registration of the machine-to-machine service provider. I think these are truly remarkable steps that the Indian ecosystem's taken, and I guess they will have the same impact as has Aadhaar in 12 years back when it was introduced. And then on the right, the TEC security report actually classifies use cases to say what to do with the use case that is CQS, CQN. It is not my purpose to try to elaborate further on the use cases, the classification CQS, CQN, CBS. For those who are interested, there's a picture of the technical report. I'd encourage you to go to the TCTR site and read up the report. But the use case classification, along with recommendations for what importance to give to availability, QoS, authentication levels, encryption, and KYC, the KYC being the non-repudiation aspect. Some of those aspects are very, very nicely written off. Almost 100 use cases have been treated in a detail. And that really at the bottom, if you see, brings up the three important things: the root of trust and the identity and authentication, followed by the end-to-end security using certificates, using registered service providers. That is the concept which I see the Indian standardization regulatory policy ecosystem to follow, which I believe is absolutely spot on. On top of that, if you have this infrastructure, then with service provider as a trusted third party. So first you have a classification of use cases, and then you have a service provider as a trusted third party, which is very strongly supported now with the work Sushilji's team has done in consumer IoT, National Trust Framework, the MTCTE. You see these things listed here. I think by dint of hard work, commitment, what has happened over 4 years, 5 years now, is that the consumer IoT trust framework, MTCTE, the IoT reference architecture, and also TC's contribution to ITU, the Y.3056 open bootstrapping framework. I think they work together to provide a completely ready standardization and policy infrastructure. It enables security by design, end-to-end security, which can enable an interoperable and standardized deployment at whatever scale you want, in whichever industry vertical you want. What is required from here is industry endorsements and global partnerships, because that is what is going to make the proof of the pudding, so to say, and actually illustrate the power of what has been put together, both in terms of standards and in terms of practices. And this registration of service provider that has just opened a month and a half back is the final, let's say, keg, which is going to hold up this tent and provide a long-term sustainable security infrastructure. Thank you very much for giving me the time, Sushilji.
Thank you, Saratji, for providing this elaborate view of all the policies and the standards. Thank you very much. Now, moving to our next speaker, Mr. Sian Galvin, the head of IoT Products Security DCMS. Mr. Sian is the head of IoT Security Policy for the UK's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports, that is called DCMS. His current role includes responsibility for the Product Security and Telecommunication Infrastructure Bill introduced last year and will cover minimum security requirements for consumer IoT products. Sian was previously the head of cybersecurity professional policy at DCMS and has a wider background in digital policy. Sian holds a master's degree in science and security from King's College, London. Over to Mr. Sian.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having us. I will just start to share the slides.
You got muted, Sian. You got muted. Yeah, you're back.
Perfect. Am I back? But have I stopped sharing as a result?
Yes, you did.
I think I may have. It seems to block me off when I go to share. Let's try that again.
Wow. Okay. You keep it displayed. Let the host try to unmute you. Okay. You go ahead with the display. Okay.
Dinesh, I think it doesn't work. I can take over the display and let Kian do the presentation.
Kian, let us display the presentation, okay?
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you very much.
Just give us a second.
Yeah. Ah, fantastic. Well, I think just on that, so that sets out everything that's been discussed previously. And if we just go to the next slide, I'll just look to quickly run through what is the UK ambition in this space. So as has been said before, we work at the UK Government Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And ultimately, our ambitions are set out in the recently published UK National Cyber Strategy. And broadly, that strategy looks to set out a plan for how we kind of optimize the opportunities of cyber and embed cybersecurity across society. And in order to do that, we have maybe three kind of broad focuses. One is around building organizational resilience and the resilience of businesses to manage their cyber risk effectively. One is around boosting the cyber skills and innovation opportunities across the UK. And the latter is around securing our existing and emerging technologies across society. And I think a core part of this is our connected technologies and making sure that as part of the wider Internet of Things that we use every day, consumers can be assured that their products are as secure as possible. And this brings us to our objective as stated here on the screen, which is really around designing, developing and deploying devices with security in mind. And so if we go to the next slide, our approach for securing consumer connected products can be broadly broken down into four parts. Starting at the top left, it pretty much outlines our plans for legislation and regulation. Going across to the top right and the bottom left as well is really around supporting and championing best approaches for industry to take through support, through guidance and through training, as well as the relevant quality assurance schemes in place. And then on the bottom right, our fourth kind of pillar of our approach is prioritizing standards and international efforts, because ultimately this is not a UK only problem. This is not a country specific problem. It's a global issue that needs a fairly global alignment and solution in this space. So I'll talk across the two blue boxes in the next couple of slides, and my colleague in the next session, he'll cover the two pink boxes. So if we move on to the next slide, I think DCMS has had a pretty active and prioritized focus on consumer IoT over the last 5 years. And this timeline kind of sets out our journey from 2018, where the UK Code of Practice was built through kind of academic expertise, industry expertise from across the UK and abroad, and brought us through the numerous consultations over 2019 and 2020 to understand how do we embed this Code of Practice into everyday life. And how can, manufacturers and broader companies use this and embed this in their work? And that brings us to the current day. So right now, our main focus is on introducing legislation on product security and telecoms infrastructure that would mandate 3 security requirements to be prioritized for all the relevant products. So that's kind of where we built from initial policy and evidence gathering to today, where it's legislation is our core focus. And so if we go to the next slide, a little bit more information about what will be in our legislation. So this legislation will have a specific focus on all relevant connectable products made available to UK consumers. And so we will place duties and responsibilities on manufacturers, on importers, and on distributors of these products across the UK to make sure that the supply chain prioritizes security as much as possible. And these security requirements, as set out on the screen, will be the top 3 that are based and aligned with the ETSI EN 303645 standard. And it's very much what we're looking to do is make sure that international efforts are then embedded into domestic legislation from our side to ensure consistency across the UK and its partners. The security requirements are there: no default passwords, a vulnerability reporting and disclosure policy, and an expectation of transparency, effectively, over the length of security updates for manufacturers to keep in place. And I think with this legislation, what we're trying to do consistently throughout is have a balance. So we need to protect consumers, but we also don't need to unduly overburden business. And it's how do we prioritize and balance the two? One way that we're doing that is making sure that we don't double regulate certain industries and certain businesses producing these type of products. For example, medical devices are covered by medical legislation, and so they won't fall into the scope of this legislation. And that's what we're trying to do to make sure it's effective, but not overwhelming for organizations to follow. If we move on to the next slide, I think this will set out the importance that we place on standards. I'm not sure has the next slide turned up, but there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So this again emphasizes the importance we place on it, and we are represented in both ETSI and ISO to start with, and you know, security of consumer IoT. As I said before, this is kind of a global problem, and one that can draw on global expertise and global experience in this space. And so, as far as possible, we want to make sure that we're both in those conversations up until this point, and going forward, to make sure that whatever legislation we do put in place now, as well as what that legislation might look like in the future, is all based and aligned to ETSI and to ISO and to the relevant standards in that space, for nothing else but other than consistency, which is important for both manufacturers and who are to be held to them, but also consumers who benefit from the products. And going on to the final slide, I think is around, again, the international aspect of this work that we prioritize so much. And it's not only just around the standards bodies, but it's also around with our engagement with partner countries and like-minded countries to align our approach and commit to progressing this work in consumer IoT. And indeed, it's fantastic to see that the UK-India cyber statement in April highlighted our joint commitment to ensuring that all IoT connectable devices are secure by design. And that really kind of sets our joint mission in this space. And I think we on the DCMS, I very much look forward to continuing this relationship going forward. And with that, I think my time is up, so I'll stop there and say thanks and hand back.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Syan, mentioning about the DCMS policies and the standards activities going on there. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dr. Gisela Miester, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant, Eurosmart. Dr. Gisela works as Senior Security Consultant on behalf of European, the voice of the digital security industry. In this role, she served as rapporteur with ETSI, TC Cyber regarding cybersecurity assessment for consumer IoT. She chairs the DIN standardization group for security requirements for IoT devices. She participates as member of European multi-stakeholder platform on ICT standardization and the European expert group on radio equipment. Over to you, Dr. Miester.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Okay. Then I will start. So, no. Yes. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. That is a good surprise for me. Yeah? So starting with immediately with the agenda, I just like to put you in the position to just to see how the EN 3.3645, the consumer IoT standard done by ETSI, is has a relation to a respective regulation. We heard already something about this. Just I will focus now on the ETCN, having the honor to speak today for ETC. So I will give you just a very short introduction to the ETCN. I have time in the next session to be a bit more elaborate on this, and then just to talk about the relation to the Cybersecurity Act and other market legislations, for instance, the RED, which was mentioned before. So the EN 3.C645 established a common baseline across the European and wider global market, and it was intended to level the security bar from all consumer IoT devices to a good level. And this is, I think, the ideas together with that it will have a very pragmatic approach that is as well accessible to SMEs and covers security as well as privacy best practice, and contains outcome-focused provision to future-proof. I think that is very important, and all what you would like to explore about this standard, you can go to this website from ETSI, and there is much more revealed. But just to show you a bit about the ETCN, but not going into the details, as I promised before, is that that besides the ETSI, the base standard, which is already published, there is a template for verticals who would like to use this ETCN, and this is published in February 2022, so recently as well. The test specification, the assessment specification, where I will elaborate in the third session, is published last year, and there is a guidance document as well to meet the EN provisions, and this gives use case examples. And as I said before, there are already vertical standards available which use the just shortly referenced template. And for instance, home gateway, it's not IoT, but it's nearly this, and so it's using this template as well. And what smart locks would be a good example, and what we intended in the future would be smart toys, where the privacy, of course, would be enhanced. And the vertical standards have the advantage, of course, to be more prescriptive, testable, and stringent specifications. So coming to the Cybersecurity Act, so it was already mentioned in 2020 that this EN is very good step in development standards to support the CSA, and it was really designed actually for this purpose, and they are possible to standards actually to provide the foundation for assessment schemes, and as I said before, pragmatic approach, and is supported by evolving consumer IoT document set, as I said before as well, in ETSI TC Cyber. This is a group which developed by ETSI this standard, and it was actually supported by CEN, the cyber group as well. So it has a really good, I think, good support by all SDOs in Europe. So for the market legislation, it was already mentioned by Emilio that there is a delegated act developed or published at the 29th of October 2021 under the Radio Equipment Directive. You have seen already the essential requirements, and the EN actually can inform the development of a harmonized standard under the RED. And ETSI TC Cyber is in the moment working on a red security requirement study. And there is a reference where you could refer to. The UK, excuse me, I was a bit too fast. The UK legislation you have already heard from DCMS, so I do not have to say a lot about this, just to give you a reference where you saw on the DCMS UK site that there are, I think, making there are references where the EN 3.3645 is already used or referenced. And this is very interesting. So I recommend you to have a look, I would say. So next point would be as well to have a look at the Cyber Resilience Act, where an impact assessment is already published and it calls for evidence. And there, I think this is just much more personal position. The Resilience Act would complement the delegated act under the Red Equipment Directive, and sets, I think, really streamlines the cybersecurity requirements on a wide range of digital products, and could be used actually together with an assessment scheme, and would be highly suitable for instance, to support their such option, which is as well indicated in the impact assessment. I would not go in the details, but if you have any questions, so I'm happy to answer them. And it would come, last not least, to the conclusion. So I think just to say what are the wins. You have established with the EN a common baseline across the European and wider global market, and it supports the Cybersecurity Act in building a bridge for future CSA IoT assessment schemes, as Andreas already mentioned as well. And it's highly suitable for use with a self or third-party assessment scheme with a red delegated with a red to if you would implement the red, or get a compliance according to the red, or for the future Resilience Act. And of course, EN 3.3645 could be used to inform a future harmonized standard, which is in work, I think, as soon as the standardization request is sent to the SDOs. And so, so you could use this, I think, as an input, I would say, input document. Challenge would be that, oh, excuse me, I'm always too fast. Challenge would be that the EN and the test assessment specification contains, besides mandatory provision, as well recommendations, of course, which has to be argued, but they are recommendations. What is not really so applicable for harmonized standards, which want to have only mandatory provisions. So you have to do something about this if you use it as such. And a framework is, it's a framework, as I said, and is therefore it's not objectively testing with most provisions. But nevertheless, I think what would be as well needed would be that the EN and future harmonized standard could be used together for manufacturer in designing his products without any conflicts. And with this, I would finish my presentation. So thank you very much. And if you would like to have any questions, I'm happy to answer them here, or you can send me an email. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gisela, for briefing about the 303.645, TS103701, and the most interesting wins and the challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker for this session is Mr. Kanish God. He is the founder of India Future Foundation. That is the society for working for cybersecurity.
Hello, sir. This is Kanish Kaur.
Founder.
Many thanks for giving me this opportunity for speaking in
Yeah,
this.
over to you, please.
Thank you, sir.
So, if you want to share some presentation, so please share it.
So let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, yeah. Please make it in slide share mode.
I'm just trying to do that, sir. One second. Let me just stop sharing. Just give me a minute. I'll make it in full screen mode. One second, sir. Just give me a minute.
Kanish, you are not able to share?
I'm not able to make it full screen, so I'll let me just.
Okay. It's immaterial. So please share your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So if you look at, you're able to see my screen, right? Right,
Yeah.
sir.
Kanishk, otherwise I can play your presentation and you can speak.
Yeah, that is also a PDF. Let him do it.
So can I request we can proceed with one more speaker? I'll just fix this and then I can present post the next speaker.
No. It's you are the last one of this session.
Okay, sir. One sec, sir. My presentation is not playing.
If it is available with Priya can present play this presentation.
Priya, if you can play the presentation.
It's in PDF. That's why
I'll just try and play it again. Just give me a minute.
It's not coming. Kanish, you may try if it's not in the full screen, so you can present without full screen.
Yeah, I'm trying again now.
If you are having
the screen, please.
Priya, if you can release the display, I will show it.
I think I don't have the right to share the screen.
Display? No.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I didn't do it. It's a PPT, then we use the template.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So my presentation is it's on the need for building a cyber resilience in the IoT ecosystem today. So if you look at today, Internet of Things has a great potential in India when it comes to various sectors, whether it is consumer IoT, retail, banking, and the entire transformation of the e-commerce industry in India is happening because of IoT. Today, India is moving towards a hyper-connected ecosystem where we are focusing heavily on last mile connectivity and delivery of goods and services. And there are a large number of unicorns getting set up in India right now. And these unicorns would require use of IoT-based systems. So the use of IoT is going to be phenomenal in India as we move forward. So if you look at the Indian IoT ecosystem today, the Indian IoT market is expected to reach around $9.2 billion. And this is going to drive the growth for the country. However, India faces a significant challenge when it comes to IoT security. One of the biggest challenge is data privacy, because currently India doesn't have a data protection law. And when it comes to connected devices for IoT, there are no regulations as such which can help safeguard PII, which is personal identifiable information. So that's a big issue. Secondly, with respect to securing connected ecosystems, IoT and IoT-enabled devices, I think there is
lack of a policy. So far, we have IoT security standard, but there is still lack of a policy and a framework which needs to be implemented in India to ensure security is taken care across sectors. The third aspect, which is a challenge, is infrastructure challenge, which requires strong connectivity. And the fourth is lack of standardization. I think standardization is a big aspect where more work can be done. And I think the Department of TEC is doing some fantastic work in terms of looking at security by design principles, looking at setting up of the National Trust Center. Those are developments where we want to see India more work happening. And I thank Sushil sir and his team for the work that they are putting in India. The other thing is that India has been deliberating an IoT policy, which is currently led by MIT. And this policy has been in a draft stage for a long time. And this policy impacts sectors across India. So for
Ganesh, we are still on your content slide. Okay, we don't see any. I mean,
you are not moving slide.
Okay, let me just.
Yeah, just flip it.
Yeah, sure, sir. Are you able to see it now, sir?
Yeah, yes.
IoT security challenge, you're able to see, sir?
It's over. So you can move to next one.
Yes, sir. Are you able to see the next slide on the IoT policy?
You can move to next slide. Next slide.
Yes, sir. So I think the formalization of the IoT policy is much needed in India for us to move forward. That's a critical element. The current policy focuses on vertical pillars, which focuses on demonstration of centers, setting up capacity building, incentives and engagements, human resource development. But what is more required is how you build up security and privacy as a key element, and you build up standardization and governance. Those are layers which are very much required when we bring out the IoT policy. That's a very, very important element. If you look at the current IoT policy, how do we deal with non-personal data is a key aspect we must address. Personal data protection, securing PII. How do you address cybersecurity issues? How do you address liability issues? Because IoT ecosystems will allow sharing of data on third-party platforms. And how do you protect IPR, intellectual property, is going to be a key aspect that must be addressed. The legislations that have been in work has been security by design or security by default. We require more work to be done on threat monitoring, breach readiness and response, secure for life, and secure operations. Recently, India has come up with this IT guideline on securing specific areas. The important aspect which is required today is that how do you secure the connected ecosystem primarily? So we are talking about companies responding about breaches in 6 hours, cybersecurity breaches. But when it comes to connected ecosystem, how do we respond? How do we build in the redundancy is going to be a very, very important aspect that we need to focus on. That's all from my end. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ganesh, for providing the detailed information about the policies. But this NDCP, National Digital Communication Policy, and the M2M roadmap, as well as the M2M service provider registration policy, they have been released by DOT in the last 3-4 years. And I think they are self-sufficient for the development of ecosystem in the country.
Absolutely, sir. I think we need to implement some of those. That's why I thank your department for doing some phenomenal work in this country on this space. Thank you. That's all from my end.
Thank you. So this now moving to the question and answer session for this one, we can open the Q&A for this. I would request all the speakers to kindly on their videos.
Sir, maybe you can open the Q&A window, and because some questions have been selected for live answer, so people can give live answer as well.
I think some of the answers have already been given. So,
Few are open, sir. So maybe you can discuss the open one, because at anyhow, we will be consolidating the Q&A responses post the webinars. Please go ahead with the open questions.
The first question is from Ankur Chakravarti. Any pointer on open source security and IoT security? Any plans, strategy for the same? As we are aware that open source components can be part of an IoT ecosystem and challenges will increase. If it is an M2M system and remote management may be a challenge. So any of the these speakers would like to reply for this question?
I'm so sorry, Sushilji, since you're not getting any other prompt, I would like to say that as such, open source in the specific sense of IoT, maybe that has not been a discussion, but in terms of encryption, decryption, in terms of security technologies more at the level of the server, yeah, there are open source systems. Maybe the question can be a bit more specific because IoT is such a large subject that generally.
Yeah, this platform may be based on open source, but devices may not be the open source. The software services may be in the open source system. But if Mr. Chakravarti can send his question to be very specific, it can be further replied. The next question is from Mr. Kalyan Verma from GRL. Is there any plan to adopt EN norms in place of ITSAR developing by NCCS? There is no such plan, and in fact, the ITSAR will have so many standards and the best practices based on this. It is the part of the essential requirements. ERs being developed by TEC and NCCS that is working on security, and ITSAR may have the EN standards as well as the other standards being released by ISO, IEC, ITU after so many discussions. The next question is from Mr. Pradeep Misra. Are there any IoT specific vulnerabilities database maintained? Okay, that question is not available. This again, Mr. Chakravarti, he has mentioned, is there any MBBS available for IoT? MBSS, IoT and M2M, which has been developed as a framework for security specifically. What is MBSS? How is the security testing standards to be considered as controls for validation, and is there any standard compliance reports that needs to be maintained at various intervals? So anybody, this speakers from the EU or ENISA would like to reply on this, or any of the speakers?
I imagine that MBSS is the minimum baseline security which the proponent is asking for. And what you can see happening with the standards in consumer IoT that TEC has just released.
Yeah.
You see happening in creating a baseline with security by design. Those baselines being getting created.
Yeah, MBSS, he has made a very good short form of the minimum baseline security standards for that. Some of the guidelines have already been sent to DOT to consider it for mandating. So for the next question, there is no other.
Is it also just worthwhile pointing out that if we continue to use that acronym MBSS, that MBSS will also become a common part of every every ER once NCCS has returned the security guideline. Is that correct statement to make, sir?
Okay, right. Yeah, thank you.
That the minimum baseline is waiting for NCCS instruction on what is the security part. I recall many of the ERs are waiting for that section to be built up.
Yeah.
And when it comes, it will become the minimum baseline.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarajji. I don't see any other questions available in this, or let me see okay further. Okay, is cyber security is implemented in automobile sector in any country?
Yes.
So, Saradi, you would like to reply?
I think Emilio is wanting to reply to that.
Yeah, yeah, please.
No, what I can say is, yeah, as far is not part of a framework yet, but of course there are activities related to standardization and looking into the security of connected vehicles, for instance, covering both the vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, and also the security of the in-vehicle components. So there, for instance, we are aware that ETSI has developed standards related to that. Framework is something that is not being considered yet, but this does not mean that it could be one of the future, because clearly connected and automated mobility is one of the technologies that are developing faster, and we are seeing more introduction in the vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, that is related with the cellular V2X, and a lot of activities are going on in this. But for the connected vehicles, in India, Saradi, you would like to say something on this?
No, thank you very much, Sushilji. I just wanted to extend what Emilio said, which is extensive work is going on with cyber security for automotive, both with 3GPP, which is ETSI, and with ITU. And there are, it is not something that can be answered in a quick way, but the whole CITS, there's an entire day's workshop that went into understanding what all is going on, but extensive work is going on in cellular ITS for security of vehicles, connected vehicles. And as you rightly pointed out, V2X.
Sushil sir, we will have to close this session.
Yes, thank you very much. I extend thanks to all the speakers of this session. Thank you very much. Now we shall move to the next session. Over to Mr. Javier.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sushil. I think we will be able anyway to address some of the questions offline and send good pointers to the participants. Now we're moving to session 3. I will ask speakers to be very mindful of the time, because we are already running quite late. The session will focus on the testing and certification of M2M and IoT. And this is really where we get to dive into how we assess conformance with all these legal requirements and standards that we have discussed in the previous session. The session will be chaired by Mr. Prasant Kumar, who is DG in charge of the MTTE program, so the mandatory testing and certification of telecom equipment within TEC in India. And I would like to hand over to you, Mr. Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank you all for your patience and your active participation in this. I'm so glad that I'm thankful to Mr. Sushil Kumar for having me this role today to be moderator for the session. Just before getting into the session, I just like to use throw some of my ideas. IoT or M2M, it is not something unconnected. It's a zillion devices going to exist around us throughout the planet. So when it's a connected network, it doesn't have a boundaries. When it doesn't have a boundaries, the very testing and certification, apart from that, counterfeit and rogue devices, this is a common problem for everybody. So this is a global problem. We need a global solution. At the same time, the testing and certification. The biggest problem globally is it is pursued as a bridge to the market access. So when you say like it's a bridge to the market access, there will be a lot of difficult regulations we frame, and sometimes the test itself is very difficult one. There will not be test facilities, like many such kind of things we are going to encounter in this world tomorrow. So how do we address it? Why can't we think globally and create a unified solution? Because it is no more an isolated development, it is actually collaborative development. We are living in a planet which is uniting us every day than dividing us. Only technology really that matters, that is uniting, rather than politics. It always had been dividing us, but this is something like that is connecting humanity. So now we have to identify a testing and certification mechanism, conformity assessment framework, in such a way that it should not be hindering the progress of the society. Unfortunately, every time when we come and we talk about, in the name of security, in the name of safety, we dent somebody some growth. So why not we allow everybody to free to work at the same time, non-intrusive way, because these are the devices that are connected to a common network. We all know who is hooking to me, and even without his notice, I can know what is really the device is. So now, because of the softwareization and virtualization, I really dream to have a automated, the moment a device is connected, it will be tested in microseconds, and it will be certified, and it can be soft stamped on that. It will be available in the network. So it should not be a process. The mitigation of malicious devices in the network should be online, should be instantaneous. I think this is how we have to come out and think globally. Perhaps if you ask me, like, are you doing it in India? No, we are evolving it. So in India, we have a very, very, very innovative ideas in the frame in creating a very, very, very impressive instantaneous certification mechanism. And we are using extensively IT tools and softwares. We are trying to develop. Yes, we are taking a leapfrog, but it's still the baby steps, I agree. But this is how we are thinking. Even our testing is a federated structure. There are 10 tests at different locations. They can test, and we are all connected, and it can be tested while it is on deployment. So we don't want to, basically the conformity assessment should not be a part, it should not be an event existing between the market access, market and the innovation. It should be a part of this innovation. So I think this is my take on the real dream about my future planet, how we have to globally think and evolve. So this is my basic, some of the crazy ideas I want to put forth this such a learned audience and highly technology experts. So I thank you all for this opportunity. Now I leave the floor to the panelists, and first our speaker is Dr. Gisela. She's a senior cybersecurity consultant in Eurosmart, and our introduction is already given by Mr. Sushil Kumar, and I think by this time floor knows about her and her achievements. Thank you, Gisela. I request you to take over. Kindly go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I will look if it goes as well as in the last session. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thank you. Then I go in the mode to present my slides. So happy to be here again and to provide the assessment specification as companion specification to the ECTS 1.3701. That was, by the way, as well a question in the formal session, so I can answer this as well now here. Right at the beginning, and I would like to introduce you as well to this specification and would like to as well to give you a hint how one could use the EN and the TS in connection to assessment schemes, what I referred to in my last presentation, but I had not the chance to explain it a bit longer. And last but not least, just to show that the EN and the TS are not used only in Europe already, but pan-European wide. So let us start with a challenge, actually. The challenge is that I do not have to say you that these provisions which were in the EN were very much outcome focused, but as well has to be meaningful. And we have really in the IoT a lot of different device types and different interfaces, and you can imagine as such that you cannot go in the deeps and details, but should be very generic from the framework of the provisions as well. That means that the test cases only can be as well a framework and very generic as well. But nevertheless, provide a help for standardization that you do it in a generic and the same way actually from the sort of the template. That is, I think, the idea about this. And there are a lot of already product assurance services, which laboratories which base on this consumer IoT and the TS. And I just show you only some interesting, for instance, as well. Oh, excuse me, I'm always flipping around that I do not have to do so. So you see TÜV offers even testing against Chinese dishwater that was in December done. So I do not think that I have to introduce the EN 3.665 anymore. I did it in my last presentation and gave you as well the hint where you can see, get more information on the Etsy site. So I would just go in this slide a bit deeper than I did before. You see, as I said before, there is a provision of template for the verticals. That means if you want to apply the Etsy EN as well as the test assessment specification, you could use the template that is published as well, and you find the link as well on the Etsy site, so that this is available. As I said before, the Etsy TS is a conformance assessment against the EN, so it provides the test cases for the provision, and it's used for self-assessment, in-house testing, and independent evaluations. There's a TR, I said so already, and as well there are vertical standards which as well will use this test specification, for instance, for the home gateway. There will be done so, and the advantage, of course, for the verticals would be that they could be really more prescriptive, more testable and stringent specification, and using the EN and the TS as a baseline. So what's about the content of the cybersecurity assessment for consumer IoT? Just it shows the implementation conformance statement, what was already included in the EN. Once more, actually, but in this case here, it's mandatory. It was in the EN optional. That is the difference. And then there is an implementation, extra information for testing. It's called so-called exit, which is much more descriptive. And there you can have built in more content. There is a catalog of generic test cases mapped from all provisions of the EN. I've shown you here. It's, for instance, it's the same structure actually as in the EN then. And the only difference is here the reporting implementation for the TS is in the beginning, and there are some annexes as well for this for showing an informative threat model, baseline attacker model, and the assurance levels. And I think what is really instructive, I think, for use is in sample exit, which shows how to use this test cases actually in practice. And I think this catalog of generic test cases I mentioned before already. So the supporter are a lot of companies which did active contributions, and I had the honor to be the rapporteur of this test specification. So how to implement this, the EN and the TS. So this is, I think, as well, to review the concept, to implement the provisions from the EN, use a conformance statement for the in the EN, or as I said, in the assessment specification. And then I think you could use this assessment specification as well for assessment schemes and future CSR IoT schemes. For instance, for the EN together with the ICS implementation conformance statement, for instance, for self-assessment scheme, for instance, for an IoT label that was mentioned, I think, by Emilio, I would say, if I am right, that these IoT labels are already somehow spread worldwide. There are IoT labels in Singapore, but for instance, are there as well, I think, in Germany and in Finland. And here I give you on this side, being German, by the way, the BSI IoT label, where you can get more information, and they intend as well to build their label. And these are very good news on the base of the EN 3.3645 and the TS 1.3701. By the way, the BSI was as well very active in contribution to the, and was co-editor for the assessment specification, and were very active as well in TC Cyber. So for a third-party certification, what is possible and feasible as well, you could use a certification scheme, for instance, published by one when it's delivered, the future CSA IoT scheme, or you could use already existing ones. For instance, the so-called CSIP scheme, which was developed by Global Platform and is now standardized in CEN JTC 13, that is a cyber group, respective cyber group for CEN. So, the advantage actually of using this assessment scheme together with a test specification would be actually to have that the producer or the manufacturer can have more integrate more additional requirements as tester expertise or cryptographic requirements, for instance, which are not standardized in the EN. It's just, they give just a hint to public available crypto catalogs, but here in this case, for use of the assessment schemes, you could really refer to the cryptography you have in use. And I think additional advantage would be you could use models already certified from your product again for the next certification. So I think that would be a modular approach. Yeah, last not least, I would just come back to the pan-European use of the EN and the TS. I showed you in the beginning to close the circle, actually show there are a lot already of labs which use this test specification together with the EN, and they are coming more, and you see from the names that are not only concentrated on Europe, but act worldwide. And I think that is very good news. And if you would like to have a complete list, I just can refer you to the DCMS side what I did already before, and I hope that I will not really take too much away from the DCMS presentation. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, just write me an email, or I will be happy to answer your questions as well in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Gisela. You have given a very exhaustive assessment specifications for IoT. I think we will be taking questions at the end. We will continue with the session because of
thanks.
time. And if you have some questions, you can write on the Q&A. We'll come back. So next analyst is Lars Nielsen. He is CEO and General Manager, Global Certification Firm. This is a very good firm. I think you should give us a lot of ideas about how we should think globally now. It's a great thing, and is responsible for expanding the global reach of certification scheme. And he has a 30 years of experience with Motorola. So we are privileged to have you, Mr. Lars. It's great to hear. I leave it to you, please.
Thank you very much, Prasanth Kumar, and hopefully I'll have less problems in sharing my presentation. And I also hope audio-wise that I come over well. I will go through our consumer IoT security accreditation program as it is today, and what we are planning to do. Sorry. So next slide. Just a few words about GCF. We have been around for more than 20 years now. We work on a non-for-profit principle. We are a membership-driven organization, really promoting mobile IoT device certification on a global level. We have today 334 member companies, and before the month is over, there will probably be 3 or 4 more. It's operators, handset device manufacturers, the testing industry working together. We are not writing standards, but work with 3GPP, ETSI, 1M2M, DSMA, and other standards organization in terms of having standards which we can use for our certification. If you look today in the mobile market, we checked a few years ago, we expect that probably 70% of all devices in the mobile networks today is either GCF certified or have chipset modules, which is GCF certified. Working globally, of course, we are engaging with a lot of industry partners, amongst them also organizations in India, and the latest is we are working with the Access Lab of GEC. Very shortly, certification costs money. There's testing cost, assessment cost involved in it. Is it really worth it? We have investigated for our normal certifications, working with a number of operators, starting with Orange. They could see that certified devices had 20% less drop rate, call drop rate, which is a significant difference in performance of mobile devices. We later worked with Bharti Airtel in India, also helping us getting 4G data. We saw the same. We worked with Telefonica, with not just European networks, but also South American networks. We saw it all over the place. Yes, certification is important, and it's worth doing it, and also for certification. While we started our life with looking really on the communication level based on 3GPP, we have expanded and looking on top of communication, what goes on, application layer like 1M2M is now a part of GCF. And in early last year, we launched our consumer IoT certification program. The initial phase is really based on self-accreditation. It's non-constrained devices. It's based on the three security provisions from the XEEN. We know default password, reports of vulnerabilities, and of course, also important to keep the software updated. As things move along, standard matures, we're seeing Etsy working on more vertical standards, test specification come on board, and also the industry adopted. Yes, we will add more provision, more features, and I'll come back to that. In terms of the details of our scheme, normally DCF certification is only offered to members. With this scheme, we have made an exception. A lot of these manufacturers of consumer IoT products may not be natural members of DCF. So we offer that service, certification service, to any manufacturer of such product. There is a small fee. However, it's very small. And it's not just about devices supporting 3GPP. Yes, they can do it, but it's really any consumer IoT product. In terms of website, we have set up a dedicated web portal to track it. Manufacturers interested in it can register at the website, get access to the documents which describes the steps they need to do to have their product certified. And once that has happened, yes, the decoration of these products will be listed on the public part of that IoT security portal. In terms of the next step, what we are working with phase 2 and beyond, yes, we are looking into, of course, extending the coverage to constrained devices as well as modules. Modules we see as very important to our membership, and that's why we specifically are interested in covering that. As such, it's not final product for consumers. However, they will be embedded in a lot of consumer IoT products. We are also looking into expanding the set of the security provisions outlined in the EN, not just stay with the initial 3 we are looking at, and also, of course, now with the conformity assessment standard available, use that as a baseline and incorporate that in the scheme. We are open to interest parties to contact us and work with us on that one. And yes, of course, that has already happened, partly from India, working closely with Sushil Kumar. If we look on it, and if you would ask me today, have your certification scheme been a big success? I would say, answer, what we are seeing is really the industry as such seems to be hesitant to get involved with these certification activities. We believe there's a number of reasons for that. Are there maybe too many schemes, too many offerings in the market for the industry today? We are also seeing it can be difficult for a manufacturer when marketing his product, that will it really make a difference towards the consumer as it is today when they're in the shop wanted to buy something, if it's certified or not? That is one of the things I think also which need to be addressed, as long as this will happen on a voluntary basis in the industry. Yes, there's a lack of certain commercial drivers. Will you get more for your product if you do certification? Are there certain markets which will open up with certification? Today, the answer to this is really no. Also, of course, I think to the manufacturers, there's a certain lack of clarity what will be mandated in regulation. There is regulation coming up around the world. My input to it, yes, it is important that such regulation will be aligned on a global level. Why? Because products today are global. Manufacturers develop one product and sells it everywhere. And hopefully the dust will soon settle. So we will start to see certification coming up and then followed up, of course, with regulatory requirements. What we are doing is right now, we're looking into a number of options. One of them is really to cooperate with other organizations in terms of offering this security certifications. It will give a wider acceptance of the scheme, but also maybe limit the number of industry schemes in the market. Also, going back to our membership, B2B products, enterprise solution is something particularly the operators within GCF is interested on. That is thing which we also will look into certification for. It is, I would say, additional requirements compared to consumer IoT. So it is not just, as we a little bit mainly talk about consumer IoT today, it is more than that. And that was really the end of my presentation. Feel free to reach out to us. You can see my email address, and I'll just share our website via the chat. So thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Prasad.
Thank you, Lars. You have given a very brief view about the certification, and I got impressed with the way you have given the impact assessment of your certification, the way you could reduce the call drops. I was indeed being in charge of M2C team in India. I've been trying to establish that certification is very important in the society. So I also developed a similar kind of reports to my honorable minister to give the impact assessment on the certifications that we are doing. So I think much to learn from you. Thank you so much. Anyhow, kindly put your questions on the Q&A, and we will come back to you with questions. And now I request Mr. Pranav Singh. Pranav Singh is a consultant, standard and specification of global R&D. IDEMIA. IDEMIA is an R&D, global R&D. It's located in Noida. And he's not new to TSC because he had been a member in very, very important 5G mobile technology and National Trust Center kind of study groups. Thank you, Pranavji. Over to you. Please take it forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks, Sushilji and Dinesh for organizing this wonderful event. Now, here is, without taking any time, I'm just coming to our presentation. Is it visible to you all?
Screen is not shared at the moment.
Not yet. Please limit your presentation to 10 minutes.
Just a moment.
And while Pranav is setting up the display, I would like to intervene and really remind the speakers to stay within 10 minutes.
Now?
Yeah, we can see it. Just let me finish with the announcement. Please stay all within 10 minutes. We will have to cut the Q&A session and address it offline afterwards, and then move immediately to the conclusion and way forward after the presentations are done from this session. Otherwise, we're running the risk of losing people from the closing session. Thank you very much.
Sure. So this is my presentation is based on total IoT M2M security essentials and the target security function requirement that is used for testing and certification. So my topic is, I think the screen is, yes. My agenda, my topic is security challenges in the generic view, security essentials and targeted SFR for the devices, data and command security, SFR and the global standards, standard security guidelines, a very close view, and the conclusion. Here is, we know the various challenges we have right now in IoT sectors, right? Hijacked devices, data read or modified during transmission, firmware updates in not tempered firmwares, something like that. But here we have to focus on four things, 4 points in my point of view. One is identity, second privacy, and third is communication, and fourth is payment. These four, if we able to securitize all four topics, then I think we can make IoT a very successful secure ecosystem. So here is now what the security essential. Security essential for the devices. I think we need a unique device identity lifecycle management. Root of trust enabled security, that is really required, because we are right now all the IoT devices are having native OS. So for the device security is here is compromised. So root of trust is very important. Digitally signed firmware is also very important to firmware updates. And the supply chain component security. This is right now the security threat, because all the supply chain components are having active program, and there may be a threat from that active program. So supply chain components security is very important, very essential. So coming to the data security essentials, the data is sent only by authorized and authenticated devices. This is the first one. Second one, nobody can read or modify the data during the transmission. Only the authenticated party can receive and decrypt the data, and works for all the technologies. This is implemented to 4G, 5G, NB-IoT, CAT-M, and all the transmission technologies. Now, coming to the command control security, that is very important, because we are using this in the GSM technologies, but right now it is very essential to all the technologies concerning the IoT. All the command needed to be secure for remote diagnostic and maintenance activities purpose. Only authorized parties shall be able to send commands, and only that authorized devices can interpret the secure command. Means all the commands shall go with encrypted form. The solution shall guarantee the command are not read or modified by hackers, and or verify their origin. That is the most important for in case of IoT. Now, coming to the how we are managing the security functions, how we can prepare the test procedure and test specification based on this security function requirement, means ensure data is exchanged only and only by between right parties. This is the one of the test procedure we can write. Data transmission security is guaranteed through the two-way transport layer security TLS, or over the TLS security we can provide using different type of protocols. Ensure the data is from valid originating devices. Collected data can also be safely stored in the devices with full encryption. And for the command control security functions, we can identify the two-way secure mutual authentication to ensure the commands configuration come only from the authorized parties. The commands sent are encrypted, perform checks by authorized operation before any command execution. And attestation for customer IoT M2M cloud, it is a very important test specification should be there. Means we have to attest the IoT M2M cloud while they are connected with the IoT devices. So coming to the next slide, here I'm trying to conclude all the standard those are working with the security. Means here GSMA, Trusted Connective Alliances, Global Platform, they are working together to publish these standards based on the security functions. These security functions are secure data communication and collection, chip access and secure boot, secure command and configurations, security for firmware and software update, security audit, and key and credential management. These are all defined in IoT security guidelines. They have written the security for all the stakeholders. Means if they are preparing the endpoint devices, then CLP 1.3. If that is for ecosystem, CLP 1.12. If that is for the network operator, then CLP 1.14. And all the security assessment checklist is available in CLP 1.17. Now, coming to the next slide, I'm right now keeping here a very wide look for the standard security functions. Means all these functions: security data collection, secure command configuration, secure audit, key credential, secure boot, secure firmware, software update, secure. So these are all defined in previous slides. These are all defined in IoT security guidelines for the GSMA, CLP 1.13 in different classes, and even 103.645 also defined all these security functions in the classes. So we can identify all the security functions, and further we can prepare test specification and procedures to secure our IoT devices and the ecosystem. Now, my conclusion is SE, secure element, UICC, EUICC as a root of trust for data security and command security to enhance the device security, because most of the devices having the native OS, they are having the proprietary OS, no protection profile, no security methods. So in case of, if you implement root of trust, then over the TLS protocol, over the security of TLS, we can implement even the more security we can implement using root of trust. Even if you implement open mobile APIs in the devices, so it will leverage the EUICC more security to the devices. Tamper-proof device anti-life cycle management is a very strong phenomena right now we have to use, because we have to use the device identity. Only device know its identity, and only the its edge controller know the device identity. No one can know, because all the supply chain identity is very vulnerable, and right now it is threat to the all IoT ecosystem. Now, identify the security function requirement for IoT M2M devices. It is prepared to test standards and procedure. For OS and software asset security, generic SOP shall be published as a security guidelines, because OS is the main firmware, operating system is the main asset to the any device. So it is very important to define any SOP, what the security should be there. Connectivity platform, IoT M2M cloud shall include under auditable and certificate programs. CMP also be there, because all the devices where they are connected, the platform should be also under certificate program and under auditable. Certificate issuer for GSMA eSIM business shall also from India, because right now GSMA is authorizing only the Verizon and DigiCert as a CI for the GSM eSIM business. I would like to request India has to adopt this as a certificate issuer from the GSMA. It shall be included in test and certificate scheme. And right now, last topic, National Trust Center can play a big role to identify the certified and non-certified IoT M2M devices in the ecosystem. So this is from my side. If any question, please put in chat box or QA. Over to Prashant, sir.
Thank you, Pranav Saab. Thank you. You have given a wonderful overview, and your research is really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
And next panelist, request Mr. Jameson Deacon, is the head of international standards and engagement for IoT product security, PCMS. James Deacon is the head of international standards and international engagement for IoT security and policy for UK Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sports. Is a member of standards committees working on IoT in both ETSA and ISO. James, I'm really proud to have you. You are an undergrad from Queen Mary University, London, and master's degree in political theory and London School of Economics, one of the brightest institutions. Thank you so much for joining. I request you to please take it.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining today and for having me as a speaker. I'm just going to.
James, you have the same problem. We cannot hear you. Your mic is getting muted. You can play the presentation if you're facing this problem again.
I will display the presentation.
Thank you, Xavier.
Coming up, sorry.
Great, thank you. If you don't mind moving straight on to the next, the first slide, Xavier. Thank you very much. So obviously, Kian Galvin spoke earlier about the two of the 4 pillars of the UK's approach to consumer IoT. He spoke about the legislation and our work with standards bodies and also other international partners. I'm going to be talking with you today about the other two pillars. So our use of assurance schemes to help support industry, and also the wider support we're giving to industry, whether that's training, guidance, or other forms of support that they require. If I could have the next slide, please, Xavier. I just wanted to briefly give an overview of the legislation, and I'll keep it high level because I know that this has come up in other presentations already. The security requirements align with ETSI EN 303-645, the top three, which we've heard referenced several times: no universal default passwords, some sort of transparency around vulnerability disclosure policies, and then transparency about the length of time that products will receive security updates. And as Kian mentioned earlier, this is going to be covering all new consumer IoT products, and where there's already existing legislation, it won't. Those products will be excluded. Next slide, please. So for us, assurance schemes play a huge role in helping to improve the security of consumer products. And we see four major benefits to the development of these schemes. So the first is that it supports manufacturers when they are trying to achieve the security outcomes that we are putting into legislation. It helps ease the market as we transition towards this legislation and any future legislation that may happen. And obviously we're looking for international alignment in this area, and therefore we hope will be beneficial beyond just consumer products introduced into the UK. In our legislation, we're going to be also appointing an enforcement authority who will be making sure that all of the products meet these requirements, and assurance schemes will help provide insight that the enforcement authority will be able to use. And lastly, it will be about helping consumers who will be able to recognize that the products reach a good level of security. So we helped the launch of three assurance schemes that cover different aspects of the consumer IoT landscape, and I'll talk about each of these now. If I could have the next slide, please. So these are the three initial schemes that we've been supporting, although we're delighted to see that there is a wider ecosystem that is developing around assurance. The three schemes that we helped promote and launch, the first one was focused on children's connected toys. So this was a scheme by the Internet of Toys, and it's designed to focus on products that are likely to be used by those under the age of 18. In the middle, we have the smart TV cybersecurity assurance schemes, and this is, as the name suggests, focused on vulnerabilities for smart TVs. And the last one is the IASME IoT security assured scheme. Now, this is a self-assessment one, and it's been designed with smaller businesses and startups in mind to ensure that they are able to get that assurance that they have access to. And all of these, of course, align with ETSI EN 303-645 and the requirements that we're introducing in the UK in our legislation. If I could have the next slide, please. But of course, assurance is only part of what I wanted to talk with you about today. The other part of it is training. And we've also been supporting stakeholders who have been working on developing training schemes. So for us, there's been work being done by the Internet of Things Security Foundation, the IOTSF, and also Oxford Information Labs, OXIL. And they've both developed together guidance and webinars to support manufacturers in the form of quick guides, which give a high level but useful amount of detail into how to meet the different security requirements. So you can see in the middle of the slide here, we have one quick guide for each of the top three security requirements that we'll be introducing. And also they produced webinars on these. So the intention is that we're trying to provide as much material as we can to manufacturers and other interested stakeholders who may need to be understanding this and making sure that they're doing everything that is required of them. I also wanted to touch on the publication by ETSI of TS 103-701, which is also designed to help manufacturers and other stakeholders to meet the provisions. And then moving on, please. That was everything I wanted to say, and I'm conscious there's not going to be time for questions, but if you have any thoughts or would like to continue the conversation with me, my email address is there, and I'm always happy to talk about international standards and more broadly about consumer IoT. And it's fantastic to have everyone on the call today who's sharing in this mission, and great to see all the work that's happening.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much. And we have our last session because of live time constraint. We are just rushing. I would like to introduce Mr. Ruben Lirio. He's a BL Cybersecurity Manager, Mobile DECRA. He's a telecommunication engineer from University of Malaga. And he has a very deep experience with cybersecurity services aligned with new regulations and standards. So he's, I think he will give us the best idea about cybersecurity field. Thank you, Ruben. Please take it forward. Thank
you. Fair. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Second, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
We are able to see.
Okay. Now I'm moving my slide. Is okay?
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, hello everyone, and thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to explain our experience. My name is Ruben Lirio. I'm the Global Director for Product Security at DECRA. Today I would like to share with you what we learned in the last year about IoT testing and certification. For this, we will explain today what are the challenges that the market is facing, what are the different initiatives that the different regions and countries are doing, some example of the IoT testing and certification program. At the end, I will give you a kind of lesson learning in this journey with our customers, but also during the execution of the testing. Okay, as I said before, the first of all, if we want to offer service that makes sense for our customer, we need to understand the challenge that they are facing. Probably the first one is related to the budget, because usually when they come to these kind of things, you have to speak with the certification manager. So it's clear that since cybersecurity is not a regulatory requirement, it's still an unnecessary cost for the certification process, of course. But if you ask customers what they are main concern, for sure they point cybersecurity, but also privacy are fundamental pillars. But this is connected to the fact in IoT devices, the sale price is low and the product life cycle should be shorter than if you compare with other markets. But even if the life cycle is short, they have to ensure that the product is secure through the whole life cycle. That is why it is necessary to handle remote updates in the devices, at least for everything regarding to the security patches. Another of the significant challenge we face when we talk about connected consumer devices is the interoperability and usability, which leads to a fairly extensive attack surface. And last but not least, understand that IoT devices is not a device anymore. So usually you have a mobile application, cloud service, API connected with cloud services. These are points that we cannot ignore when we want to evaluate the security of this kind of devices. So these are the limitations that we have to understand very, very well if we want to design certification and testing services. I don't want to go into the detail because I think our colleagues before me explained super well what is the framework and what is the different initiatives in the different countries. Just let me point out a couple of things. Just the cybersecurity of product is a challenge, not only for the manufacturer, but also for the government. And we see more and more countries launch different initiatives. If you want to group some of them, you have countries but for labeling program, for example, Singapore, Finland, USA, Germany. Other regions, as the European Union, develop laws at GDPR for privacy, but also the European Cybersecurity Act, an horizontal act, as Mr. Andreas Mitlak has explained very well, that address different certification schemes like common criteria, cloud, 5G, or even IoT in the near future. More recently, the delegated act for Red Directive mentioned by Mr. Emilio Davila that will be mandatory in August 2024 for any radio equipment connecting for the internet directly or indirectly to internet. Okay. Other countries, as our colleagues are playing right now, is the UK, have published a voluntary code of practice for IoT devices, and they are developing new certification scheme. In any case, this is not the point of this presentation. The important thing here is all these initiatives, sooner or later, will be essential requirement that the manufacturer have to meet before launching their product in this market. Okay, so before to look some example, let me share with you some questions from our customers regarding different programs. The first, what is my target market? Are some of these programs mandatory to access to this market? Or this certification program give me a better position for my product? Once you answer this kind of question, you have to ask yourself, hey, my product meet the minimum requirement to pass the evaluation? This scheme has level, has protection profile. What is the evaluation method that I have to follow? Another question is, what happened the day after obtaining the certification until the end of the product life? There are market surveillance, renewals, and another point, and this is linked with some of the challenge is regarding to the budget, is you have extra costs for testing, for certification, renewal, but also what is the average time for one evaluation plus certification? We are talking about days, weeks, months. This is the typical question that the manufacturer, the system integrator has to ask before to start the certification journey. Once the manufacturer has a clear picture about the certification and testing strategy, they have to start the process. Let me explain 4 different examples. There are many more, no question. But I think this can help to represent different program flavors, if you want to say, okay? The first one is IoT. This scheme is promoted by the industry, allows self-assessment, but also the evaluation by the recognized laboratories. They have a baseline profile that applies to almost any IoT devices and vertical profile for this kind of devices that has a special requirement. CTI instead have a different approach. The number of devices under this scheme is limited to the type of wireless technology they use. Only devices with cellular technology or Wi-Fi technology are good candidates. In addition, CTI has 3 different levels of evaluation, and the evaluation must be by a recognized laboratory. Another example, probably this is quite different, is the Amazon Alexa program. If the manufacturer wants to use Alexa technology to build Alexa built-in devices, they shall perform independent security assessment by an authorized lab. And finally, the cybersecurity labeling scheme from Singapore is for sure is promoted by the government as a voluntary scheme applied to almost any consumer smart device, as well as CETIA is based on levels, and they allow the self-assessment for level 1 and 2, and third-party evaluation is mandatory for level 3 and 4. Just to point out, the baseline for this scheme is the HCN 303645, but in the higher level, penetration testing is mandatory. Now, let me explain what is our perfect proposal, if you want to say, okay? After working with different programs, manufacturers worldwide, the most well-accepted standard, no question, is HCEN 303645. So no question, this should be our baseline. ESID established a common baseline across the European and also other countries worldwide. It's comprehensive, covers security, but also privacy best practice, and cover a wide range of devices. If the product meets the provision, every major attack so far should be covered. And another important thing to consider is when you face this kind of thing, is the competence of the testing lab. This is super important because have a direct impact in the influence of the validity of the different assessment, result, and so on. So together, HCM 303645, together with the technical specification, is a good base to offer accredited testing according to ISO 17025 to deliver to the customer trusted and valid results. If we translate into a level certification program as a possible solution, okay, we can group the first level, conceptual assessment, assessing the conformity of the documentation provided by the customer against the requirement of the provision. ETSI technical specification call this kind of documentation and information ICSID, as Gisela mentioned before, and this show the conformity of the design. The second level will be functional assessment, assessing conformity of the product, functionality, and associated services against the requirement of the provision. This is conformity of the implementation. And finally, pen testing, for sure, with some restriction, for example, scope, limited in time, where we can cover the service and mobile apps interacting with the device, and another specific vector attack that probably in one way or another is not tested in the previous level. This approach could give to the manufacturer different possibilities for the different certification programs or seals or whatever they want to get. Okay, and finally, the conclusion, what we learn from our customers. So the first things customers are looking for is a security evaluation that mitigate possible vulnerabilities, and this evaluation or testing is aligned to comply with current and future regulatory frameworks or programs that allow going into a specific market. Let me give you an example. If you want to implement Alexa technology, you have to follow the Alexa security program. So customers looking for a security evaluation usually is a pen testing with an approach in a gray box and limited in time. This is super important. The customer wants this testing is executed by a certified engineer. So the certification of the professional is super important for them. Then is intending to use this word, this evaluation word, to pass some certification that are in the market, and that may be interesting for the customer. In short, they are looking for cost-effective and high-quality and trustable solution that help them to save money, time, and be well positioned in the current and future market. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I know we don't have time for questions, but please, if you have any, more than happy to answer offline or through the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your wonderful inputs, and it is really good education for us. Like especially, I would love to be in touch with you because we are contemplating many such test and certification issues in the country. So it would be like great help for us if we can engage with you, and I think that's very wonderful thing. So now I request, I think this session is completed with this, and as per the organizers' request, since there is no time, I think we'll be taking questions online, and all questions will be answered offline, and you will reach in your inboxes your answers to the questions. Thank you so much. I request Tony and organizers to take it forward to Ms. Namrata Singh to vote of thanks session. Thank you. I hand it over to the organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for chairing this session. And I'll try to sort of catch up with a slightly overrun time. So, I mean, in terms of, I thought the discussions were extremely interesting. The presentations were very full, and I'm therefore very happy that you know, our delegation and the program CC and Indico organized this event, and that through that way we could continue the dialogue, the exchange of best practice, which we have had intensely over the last 3 to 4 years about digital technologies and standardization and security in that context. And we've had in particular already 2 events dedicated to ITSAR and to other security and safety requirements. And again, today it allowed us to present the European approach to that. And I think the CE marking is like a global success. So just maybe in a nutshell, the sort of conclusions I drew during the course of this morning or this afternoon. I think first of all, everybody agrees on the Indian side, on the EU side, about the importance of the digital transition for the development of our society and economy. And I think it's an important prerequisite, and it's important we just state that again. I think secondly, I think everybody also agrees that IoT is a key element in this context. And that in that respect also for the development of IoT, that working with global standards that provide global, I mean, the keys to global successes and interoperability are also absolutely of the essence. Without them, there cannot be the same global successes and the same benefits to consumers or industry. Thirdly, I think that in that context, of course, the fact that India adopted one M2M as a national standard is an excellent starting position for the development of IoT in India. And I'm so very happy that we cooperated very strongly between the European Union and India and the Indian government to make that success of one M2M, therefore, to give this starting point. Then I think fourthly, I mean, security and safety are, of course, essential elements also for the development of IoT. And I mean, we've seen a lot of solutions which were presented. I think also in this context, many speakers have said it, it's important that we, and also from the European perspective, of course, what we see as very important for the development of IoT in that context is that we make sure that sort of the costs, the additional costs and the administrative burdens which can be derived from this are kept to the minimum, and in particular when one thinks about the testing and certification. And I think we were happy that from the perspective of the European Commission that we could again present the solutions we're bringing to this in the European Union. And as I said before, I think the global success of the CE marking is absolutely key and is indisputable in terms of the success of the European system. Now, I think it was a great exchange, and I hope we can continue it also as part, in particular, as part of our political dialogue, which we have in the ICT joint working group. But I'm sure my colleague Benoit will say more about that. So again, a big thank you. It's a very warm exchange always between India, our colleagues, and meantime friends in the DOT and TEC and us on the side of the European Commission and DG Connect. We're very happy that today we could continue this, and we see an important future ahead for this joint cooperation. Many thanks to all the speakers. Many thanks to our colleagues on the Indian side, and of course to all the organizers, Dinesh and Xavier in particular, to mention. Many thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. De Coster, for your remarks and good wishes. And in fact, it was a very important webinar organized with the help of Mr. Dinesh Sarma and Mr. Javier. This webinar was having the speakers from ENISA, ETSI, Eurosmart, and DCMS, DECRA. We were having around 8 to 9 speakers from abroad. So, and we were having a very good discussions and exchange of information about the IoT security policy perspective, legislations, standards, and also the certifications, the importance of certification, mainly the ITC 303645, and how the ecosystem can be created for the testing and certifications for one M2M and the ITC 303645. That is the main requirement for us, and we expect from this webinar that something will come out as a solution for this. And as we know that the collaboration, that is the key to the success of the standardization and the interoperable standards that will lead to the economies of scale, and which is very, very important for the IoT domain, because billions of devices will come into the network. So if we are not having economies of scale and the interoperable solutions, it will be difficult to have the sustainability of the network, and as well as the devices and the smart infrastructure which has been created is required to remain smart for a long time, for the not only for this generation, even for the future generations. And for that we need standards and the interoperable standards, and for this the collaboration, that is the key for the success of all these items. So we hope we will be having such webinars in futures also on so many other emerging topics. And I am really thankful to you for sparing your time, and also the speakers for sharing their views in this webinar. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, for your words, and I'm glad to hear that you're happy with the result of this workshop. From the perspective of the delegation of the European Union to India, I would like to share my perspective maybe on a higher level context, not entering into the technical discussions, and also to pave the way for the future collaboration. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the eminent and enthusiastic speakers, as well as the moderators, including SEP and coordinators. I think the event was a success, not only on the technical aspect, as you mentioned, which Mr. Kumar, but also in reaching these high-level objectives. And these high-level objectives that were announced at the beginning are learning from each other and cross-fertilization in way of reaching and working toward convergence of frameworks and alignment on standards. You mentioned the aspect on interoperability and economy of scale. So definitely, I mean, we reached a lot this afternoon or this morning. Did we cover all the points that you wanted at the beginning? Certainly not. I noted some of them that we didn't have either the time, or because the format was not allowing it, were not covered. Anyway, we will have more opportunities for exchange. Enisa already mentioned their certification, cybersecurity certification conference on the 2nd and 3rd of June. That will be another opportunity. But I will also invite you to have a debriefing, to join for a debriefing for the next step and the possible next avenues of cooperation, be it under the format of a seminar, including in-person seminar, which would maybe not allow that many people to participate, but also to allow this informal discussion that are very important to build relationship. Or also study tours. Mr. De Costa mentioned at the beginning that we organize that for other topics. That would be also a possibility for exchange. And anyway, the dialogue will be there in the joint working group. I just want to mention that anyway, what has happened today is very important also on a political point of view, because it's giving flesh and bones of this Trade and Technology Council that was launched by Prime Minister Modi and President von der Leyen. And this council, working at the nexus between trade, trusted technologies, and security, I mean, show that the topic that we discussed today is fully, I mean, at the center of this endeavor. It's not only important for that, but also for the cyber dialogue between EU and India, where, of course, this aspect of cybersecurity, of Internet of Things, will be also central, and they are of also geostrategic importance. So thank you very much for that, and I would like just to finally thank the organizers, CC and INICO, for gathering these interesting and relevant speakers and attract this big audience. We will count on you and your expertise in one way or another to keep this dialogue going on. Thank you to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Namrata, I would request my colleague Namrata to give a word of thanks.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of Telecommunications Engineering Center, I would like to extend my sincere vote of thanks to all the distinguished guests and eminent speakers from India and abroad for sparing their valuable time from their busy schedules and sharing deep insights on the importance of security of IoT domain, its policy and standardization perspective, overview of M2M testing and certification, etc. I wish to express sincere gratitude to Member Services, sir, Senior DDG, sir, and our eminent speakers and guests from European Commission for gracing this occasion with their august presence. I would also like to thank all the participants and hope that this webinar would have helped them in developing some knowledge base about this subject. Last but not the least, special thanks to Mr. Xavier and Mr. Dinesh Sharma ji for extending their continuous support in organizing this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. So, have a safe day and enjoy the day. Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Benoit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
We shall be meeting again. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much.